Hello and happy Friday, everybody. It's that time of the week. It's time for the Security Token Show. That's when Kyle and we have the latest and greatest tokenization news for you now for the 294th time. Rolling up to 300 here. Kyle, how are you this week, my friend?
Herwig, I am doing really, really well. We had some mind-blowing news come out with respect to the U.S. regulators. We never thought this day would come. We just really never thought this day would come, and here it is. I can't wait to dive in.
What a year. It's really nice to just have an exciting time like this again, since I think the last time I felt like this was 2017, maybe 2018, but it really all started to go downhill from there, I feel like. So good on the U.S. and everybody that's pioneering the space today. What a time to be alive, as I like to say, as RWAs and crypto are perfectly lining up. Throw in their TradFi and politicians. Man, it's going to get crazy. So with that, Kyle, let's break it down the episode, shall we?
Let's do it.
No guests this week. Everybody's on a little summer holiday, but of course, you and I were here always on the front lines, ready to give you the latest and greatest RWA news, aren't we, Kyle?
That's right. That's right.
Well, you alluded to it earlier. Project Crypto. Okay, we've heard now since the beginning of the year how basically the White House under President Trump has made it a mandate to make America the crypto capital of the world again. So far, so good, I'd say, Kyle, at least from what they can get done. The SEC has been very responsive. Many of the other agencies as well. The White House itself just published a paper on digital assets and why it's the future. And definitely worth checking out. Some great pieces on tokenization in there as well, of course, as markets are inevitably going to move on chain, which is what the SEC chairman himself is saying. Okay, as part of Project Crypto, that's 100% the expectation. He laid out a vision, essentially describing between reward tokens, network tokens, of course, the difference between stable coins eventually and securities, which we'll hopefully get from the Clarity Act. But with the Genius Act passing, Kyle, wow, I'd really say America has turned things around. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Genius Act was a big first start in essentially legalizing stable coins in one way or another. Obviously, there's a lot of bells and whistles there on what that actually looks like. But the first piece of crypto-based regulation passed in the U.S., fascinating stuff. And just on the heels of that, now the SEC showcasing that, look, it looks like they're not going to be doing much enforcing of some of these crypto-based projects anytime soon. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing. We obviously know that there's all these treasury companies, there's all these ETF products. They also just recently allowed in-kind redemptions for Bitcoin ETFs, which I think is super bullish because it will force these ETF companies to actually hold the underlying Bitcoin because of that threat of redemption, which I think is just generally a good thing for the markets. But we're seeing a modernization of financial markets happening in real time, Herwig. This is just, it's so cool to see and be a part of it.
I mean, the way Chair Atkins is basically green lit, as we were talking about the way crypto innovation was thriving back in the day. It's I feel like it is now encouraged once again. The environment has been made clear that, unless you're actually committing fraud, unless you're actually planning to skirt securities laws and commit problems there, we encourage the crypto behavior. I think that's essentially what the SEC is saying. And I think a lot of people are hearing that. I think the message has been received now with Project Crypto. And I expect between regulation and legislation and just market forces, once again, bringing innovation to light, I think the market is going to get pretty crazy. And I think we're seeing that already, aren't we, Kyle?
That's right. That's right. But it's exciting. It's such a cool opportunity right now to be building in this industry and to be building in the most liquid capital markets in the world. And look, I think you'd be foolish if you thought that Wall Street wasn't going to be coming for this space. We see the power that the traditional capital markets brings from a liquidity perspective. If we thought we had seen it before, I think we've seen nothing yet.
Well, Kyle, I want to point out that we're talking a lot in the last couple of years, really, about how institutions are now moving into it. You just said Wall Street, right? Well, how about the biggest name out there, JPMorgan Chase, who we've heard quite a lot about, Jamie Dimon's comments about Bitcoin being a pet rock. That's one expensive rock today. So I think, again, a lot of people suspect that that's more of a public talking point than it is a reality, since we all know they've been hard at work with JPM Coin and everything else that the Connexus team is doing now today. But they've officially accepted crypto as part of their strategy now, Kyle. They've announced that they're working with none other than Coinbase, arguably the biggest U.S. Company in crypto out there, joining forces with the biggest bank. Very cool to see. They're planning to do direct bank-to-wallet connection through an API. This means Chase customers will be able to link their bank accounts to Coinbase seamlessly, not through third parties. They'll be able to also transfer their Chase Ultimate Reward points, which I thought was fascinating. You're going to be able to take your reward points and I think turn them into USDC or something else to fund their crypto wallet, which is, I think, very, very cool to see that come into crypto. And then they say later in the fall, you'll be able to use Chase credit cards on Coinbase as well. So these are, the first little steps to say, hey, we're going to help our users access crypto using the JPMorgan Chase infrastructure. And that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal where we're headed, Kyle. What do you think?
This is right on the heels of JPMorgan supposedly taking over Apple's credit card program as well from Goldman Sachs. I saw those rumors in the news as well. So starting to see a lot of these big fintechs all coming together in different ways. So that would be maybe the hot take of the year potentially is maybe we see Apple in one way or another getting involved in the blockchain ecosystem, which would be very unlike them with respect to what they've done in the past. But this connection is definitely forming and potentially you could see some smoke in the air. But I definitely think that this is needed. The on-ramping, off-ramping problem for retail is still kind of an issue. So the faster that we can streamline that, I think it's very good generally for the industry.
I'm always talking about trying to get Apple into the game with their example of their stock being their best product, right? If they can align purchases for their stock by tokenizing it and creating incentives like perhaps discounts on their products or other benefits like early access. As everybody knows, there's a rabid cult culture around Apple products, right? That's going to create pressure and demand on their stock, which is the thing they care about the most. So ultimately, would love to see that happen. And Kyle, good on Coinbase as they kind of enter, I think, the next chapter of their, business life. In terms of going into what they're calling the everything app. They're not just a crypto exchange anymore. They're not just providing a variety of different services between custody and other, pro tools. Now they're saying they're going to get into prediction markets. They just announced their new app with social media features and other tools connecting everything into one place. But of course, what we're most excited about on this show is what they've been hinting at for a while now. In fact, for years, they've known about it, but now they're getting real. They're saying we're looking at on-chain equities. They're seeing what Kraken, Gemini, Robinhood, and others are doing. But Coinbase, with their 100 million plus wallets, is in a great position to bring on-chain equities, hopefully in the right structure. There's a lot of back and forth about how exactly the way you can do that or the right way to do that is, but also worth noting that prediction markets are also on their nodes. We've seen the success already in the past with Polymarket and others. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this Coinbase plan here, this strategy?
Well, Herwig, it's the Everything app has a very similar sounding phrase. I feel like I've heard that one before from a crypto exchange that's looking to do crypto and derivatives and tokenizing everything. I think famously they were talking about tokenizing chairs and furniture inside of the home.
Larry David, the spokesperson of theirs, maybe?
Larry David, right. And maybe Shaq.
Maybe Shaq too. I don't know. I think
that's right. That's right. It was FTX. Yeah. No, I think this is awesome. And look, I think to Coinbase's credit, they took it a step further with Base, right? They own the blockchain stack. They own the trading stack. They obviously have probably the most liquid or one of the most liquid exchanges, certainly domestically in the US, but potentially internationally as well, with the exposure to BlackRock and all the other ETFs that use Coinbase custody. So I think this is a huge win. We've been waiting for them to tokenize stock. The question will be, what is the first stocks that come on their platform? Are they going to mirror what we've seen, no pun intended, from Republic with their mirrored shares and with Robinhood with their tokenized shares, which are private companies and there's questionable level of underlying backing? Or is Coinbase going to start with their own stock and do a tZERO play and have a digital dividend and trade their own stock on their own platform? Or like what we saw with Gemini, thought about doing something similar? Or are they going to do the backed finance play or one of these other companies where they start with Tesla, they start with MicroStrategy, they start with those types of companies? I think those are the three different playbooks. It's private companies, it's your own business shares, or it's high growth tech stocks that are in high demand. Herwig, do you have any thoughts or predictions on which of those three paths you think they're going to take?
My money is 100% on tokenizing their own shares. That's a bar none, which tells me that they're probably going to get into more public equities action. We know already from the OpenAI statements that there isn't a lot of positivity around tokenizing private companies without their permission. So I'm not so sure that that's the route that Coinbase wants to lean into. If I suspect they've already been hinting at exploring the benefits of tokenizing their own shares. Which would make me think that public infrastructure is what they're after, right? They presumably would lend to be the next New York Stock Exchange potentially, if they can really provide the rails for users to come in and trade on-chain equities, right? Or equities in general. In this case, they just happen to be on-chain and a lot more powerful for their customer. So, it's under my belief that that's the next generation. And that's what they're going to lean into. Same thing with prediction markets, a kind of something that's already, is proven, it's out there, is a good business to go after. So, but it'll take time. I don't think it'll be in the next few months. It might even be until next year until we even see these tokenized equities, but maybe not, just given that the market continues to get more exciting every day, just creating more and more beautiful FOMO for everybody about RWAs and getting into the race. And speaking of, tZERO is taking another stage in its life with its next chapter, if you will, by launching its own RWA chain, its own tZERO chain, as well as its own utility token powering all of that. So this is one of the OG platforms in the tokenization space, right? One of the first ATSs to launch. They're one of the highest volume from a secondary market perspective, which we all know isn't a very large market at the moment. But still, they got a lot of licenses. They're backed partially also by ICE, Intercontinental Exchange, sorry. One of the biggest stock exchanges in the world, powering the New York Stock Exchange and many others. So that makes you think that ICE for sure wants to make tZERO maybe what we've seen in many other cases, kind of like a digital asset exchange, like if you see with the SDX and the SIX, for example. But Kyle, what do you think about this new move? Instead of a marketplace, now they're moving into actual technical infrastructure here by becoming the blockchain itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, Herwig. I mean, on one hand, I'm a huge fan of this idea. I think it makes sense that everybody has their own chain, tracks all their own data on chain, and then works on interoperability to connect into the broader ecosystem. My question, I guess, and would be a question I would have for the tZERO team was it a technical issue that they've been facing in terms of driving adoption to their platform over the last, call it almost 10 years? The lack of liquidity, the lack of new listings, the lack of buy-side demand. We've seen, competitors in the space that have not had the same issues necessarily on at least new listings, at the very least, that it doesn't seem like that's necessarily a technical issue. That being said, some of their competitors are launching similar products. So I think it makes a lot of sense. But I'm just not sold that this necessarily solves the bigger criticisms of the platform at large. And Herwig, I don't want to be a bear here, but it is interesting that a few of their executive team members left the firm to join a different, now what seems to be competing blockchain platform. And so maybe this L2 is built on that competing platform, in which case it would make a lot of sense. But if it's not, presumably they would have seen this coming down the pipeline and decided to go somewhere else instead. So I think that I definitely need to see more information before I get too excited about this.
It is true. It is true that their biz dev team went over to Aptos, however you're supposed to say it. But maybe that is also a sign, right? To say, hey, that's where the market is headed. That's a reason why tZERO needs to have this. And maybe it is coming up as something that's part of the value proposition. Definitely recommend everybody go look into the press release they put out regarding it, so you can kind of learn more about the setup. But they're looking to leverage a lot of their supposed IP that they already have, right? That's patents that they have around a lot of this technology. They plan to have cross-chain interoperability, so this isn't about it being all on their own chain. And of course, we know the power of a utility token, a native token, that if designed with the right economics, the right tokenomics, if you will, that's been very successful for some other RWA companies in the space to date. So just maybe this may be a powerful way for tZERO to unlock a whole new market, enter a whole new market, and make their whole ecosystem just that much more powerful. So if Coinbase went and launched their own base as well, maybe it makes sense for an exchange like tZERO to do the same thing. And it's not like they've ever had a lot of strong connections to any one chain, Kyle. I think they were on Polygon or maybe Ethereum for their initial primary issuances that they just transitioned to, right? I forget. Right. But I'm a big fan of that. Good for them. They've got a lot of movement, a big community. Hopefully they execute well here. And I know that there's a lot of bridges and a lot of platforms like Global Settlement that can help make sure the whole market is tied together.
That's right.
There's one last big market movement we got to talk about this week. There's, of course, a lot more RWA news. There's so much every single week. We're going to get to that. There's one more big one, wasn't there, Kyle?
Yeah, this was definitely the banger of the week. I think you and I probably both got messaged a dozen plus times about this article over the week. It definitely made the rounds, and it's not necessarily great news. Do you want to lead it off?
Well, we've been following this company for a while. I've even known the founder before they even started it when they were in the crypto space. They were early Bitcoin miners down here in Florida, got into the ICO game, and they were also real estate moguls, I guess, if you will, that eventually it all culminated back when they started the company, I think 5-6 years ago now. RealT is what we're talking about. RealT has come under fire. One of the most prolific tokenization companies out there with 300 plus properties, maybe more, all around the world, but a majority of them in Detroit. Also Section 8 housing, also bringing a lot of skepticism to sort of the underlying asset. It turns out the city of Detroit is suing the company for a lot of foul play regarding even allegedly not selling actual properties they didn't own, selling tokens of properties they didn't own, supposedly, as well as many sort of violations within the codes of the houses and all that stuff. It's pretty damning. And it certainly is not good for the industry, right? The whole point of RWAs is we've got protections. we've got, a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that RWAs are safer than crypto. In this case, there is infrastructure, right? You literally have the city of Detroit using the legal system potentially right now. But what does this mean for the whole community? RealT is obviously bigger than just the properties in Detroit. They have put out a response. It's worth everybody doing their own research. We're certainly going to see and dig into this ourselves. We haven't really had a chance too much. We hope to try to get Remy himself, one of the co-founders, on the show if we can here. But there's a lot of ways you can look at this, but it's certainly not great, huh, Kyle?
Yeah. I definitely want to start with this point that these are all allegations at this point. And so I don't want us to throw shade to a guy that we've met him in person quite a few times. You and I have actually gone to see the properties in Detroit. So I think we've probably done more diligence than most on at least checking these things out. And obviously we don't work with him in a commercial way and certainly don't endorse the financial products or those things in the event that there's any issues. But I want to make sure that we allow the due process to happen, because he has added a lot of value in the industry by bringing a lot of successful security token offerings to market. He was able to build a very healthy demand for these products and built liquid trading tokens and built lending and collateralization behind these tokens. So there was a lot of really interesting innovations that did happen through a lot of the RealT pipeline and through their ecosystem. And I think that's to be commended, and it has been very useful for us in kind of pointing to that as a successful case study. That being said, if this is true, that would be not great at all. It would be really disappointing, I think, on the sale of assets that you don't own, on these types of things. I think there may be some concerns around tax stuff, which always is something interesting for us to think about. And I don't know. Part of the problem with some of this stuff is, as we've talked about in previous administrations, there's a lot of regulation by enforcement, right? Where there's maybe a gray area. And if you're, let's say, trading tokens that don't necessarily represent the entire property changing hands, are property taxes or sales taxes applied to those tokens, right? There's maybe a gray area around that. And so maybe one side of the coin is saying, no, we don't need to pay those things. And the other side says yes. And now there's a big lawsuit about failed taxes, right? And so
I think what you're leaning at, what you're guiding at, right, is there's a potential, look at it from the devil's advocate position of the city itself may not be too happy with what RealT is doing in terms of tokenizing its Section 8 housing, how it's managing that. In fact, selling that yield to international investors exclusively. Sure. And as you pointed out, maybe even potentially avoiding taxes. And as we've seen a lot of allegations, even words like Ponzi and other things being thrown out, that gets really scary. That needs to be pursued and investigated and absolutely enforced. But there is a possibility I could see, Kyle, where you're coming from, where perhaps this is the city itself also wanting to take a little bit more control over what's going on here. This is classically what happens with innovation in technology. We saw the same thing with Uber, with taxi cabs and such. This is on a little bit of a different level. And again, there's some serious assertions in there. So definitely recommend everybody go check this out, because we definitely have been following this company for some time. But we definitely stand with what we always do, seeking the truth. So hopefully we will be able to cover that for you here on the show as we continue on. But Kyle, that's only one little negative thing. Hopefully we overcome the rest. Mostly just exciting positivity for the space. Nothing but new offerings, new updates all around the world, more partnerships. We're going to get into it. Let's get on with the show, shall we?
Let's go.
Well, starting off here with some new tokens, because now every week we've got a batch of new exciting offerings, not always for all of us to be able to participate in, but we want to keep you up to date. First of all, eToro is joining the foray and jumping in on the 24/7 trading of tokenized stocks and futures. on the eToro platform, which is one of the bigger crypto exchanges out there. We've seen many like Gemini, Kraken. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Coinbase looking at potentially the same. That ultimately, we're seeing every crypto company start to look at RWAs, on-chain equities, specifically a lot of U.S. listed equities being in European markets. In this case, to start, as we know, there's probably a lot of issues to be able to do that here in the United States. Imminently waiting for Ondo's global markets to also launch, which is targeting this exact sector, but also switching pace from on-chain stocks to domains, Kyle. About 22 million of them will be tokenized by InternetX, Ionis's InternetX on Doma. So that's pretty cool. I want to talk about their interesting caveats of tokenizing domains, but also Risevest U.S. equities are coming to Xend Finance, specifically through yield method here. So I'd love to explore that a little bit further as this comes across the desk. So if you're a Xend Finance user, congrats on this Risevest partnership. VERT Capital tokenizing $1 billion in debt. VERT Capital is out of Brazil. They have $1 billion in debt. It's private credit, type play here. Receivables coming to the XDC network. Another chain supporting RWAs making a rise on the scene, it appears, and $1 billion is no small figure, although as we often like to say on the show, to kind of scrutinize that, the bigger the offering, the more likely it's either being done in tranches or in pieces, and it's not being done overnight or being sold, which is a lot easier to put on chain than just actually doing the former. And last but not least, Kyle, FG Capital Advisors has opened up a private round for tokenized carbon financing streams, they call them, through pre-launch safes that will be on chain. Any of these offerings you want to talk about or have any comments on?
Stream financing for pre-launch safes. That's interesting. I think that there's all these really innovative structures that are being launched. And I think that I've talked about this on a variety of X spaces, the live streaming software, as well as on different podcasts and things. It's a really interesting time in the market for financial structuring, because the advent of tokenization allows us to have broad distribution to new assets anywhere around the world, as well as investors anywhere around the world. And when you tie that with the AI revolution, that can allow for quantitative modeling that presumably is deeper and more layered than perhaps we even can fully wrap our heads around. There's going to be these types of structures that I think come out that become really, really difficult to diligence in a good way and a bad way. I think that there's going to be some super innovative structures that are downside protected or provide upside lever and things like that. But at the same time, we're going to start seeing some of these buzzwords around structures that are just incredibly complex in the best type of ways. I think that carbon has kind of consistently been this type of asset class that has a lot of potential, but no one's quite been able to figure out how to crack that nut. And so fingers crossed that FG Capital has really something interesting here. And then, eToro is great. Another one of these platforms trading tokenized stocks. I think before you know it, these things are really going to start blowing up. And Herwig, as we've talked about, maybe it's not the ATS reckoning, maybe it's the trading stocks reckoning that actually drives that type of conglomerization that we've talked about for so many years. Do we see NASDAQ acquiring a eToro, for example, just because they want to have access to crypto trading and they want to have access to the tokenized stocks markets? There's something interesting brewing on this front. And again, I don't no insight on eToro specifically, but to use them as an example.
Oh, there will surely be a roll-up of crypto exchanges in the near future, right? That seems like it's inevitable, just given the nature of how many there are. But also, quick correction, the eToro thing, it's actually 24/5 trade, not yet 24/7. So we're talking about, of course, Monday through Friday, although we are seeing some other players explore that weekend trading window. So very exciting times as on-chain U.S. equities, public equities, basically are forced into the blockchain world in so many different structures and methods. But Kyle, moving on, we also saw some institutional news. BNP Paribas, they joined Fnality's settlement system. And we're actually seeing a lot of action around these new settlement systems, these new exchange platforms. We also saw Link launch recently as a sort of real-time settlement system. JPM kind of made their way with their JPM coin this way. Fnality, do not sleep on it. That's Fnality for those who are just listening. And they have executed on an interest rate swap payment with Lloyds. So very cool to see this sort of traditional finance move on chain using Fnality. We also saw Abaxx, and then they're a public company, I believe, on CBOE at least. And Abaxx, that's with two X's, ABAXS, is tokenizing money market funds tied to what they say is their proprietary identity and title technology, private digital titles. And they released a study that you can go learn or you can go check out to learn more about what they're doing. And some final regulation news, Kyle. There's a new stablecoin bill in South Korea. The president over in South Korea has been very pro crypto and bringing in a lot of legislation is similar to President Trump here in the United States. So there's a lot of pressure to pass something like this. Seems like South Korea is fast following the United States, if you will. And Plume and Web3 Labs, they've actually partnered up for forums on RWA policy over in Hong Kong and China. So good for them. Always love to see industry players getting together and doing the work. Kyle, any comments on any of these last pieces of news this week?
Well, look, regulators are opening up the floodgates here, man. I really think that this is starting something interesting, and it may or may not happen. Who knows what happens in 2025 or 2026? It doesn't necessarily mean the prices are going to go up or going to go down. But when I look at from a macro perspective, from a broad timelines perspective, where we're going to be in 2030, it's impossible not to be so incredibly excited and bullish about what's being built here and about the inroads that have been made on a lot of these infrastructure pieces from regulatory capacity, which was always the bottleneck. That's what everybody was always saying for so many years, was it's regulators. Well, the time is now. The time is absolutely now, and I'm just so psyched about that.
Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon. I mean, gosh, basically every CEO, every major bank or asset manager is getting behind it. It's exciting times. That's why we also started the RWA Foundation. So before we pick a company of the week, let's get into some quick updates there. It's a great time to be in RWAs, and it's a great time for the RWA Foundation to finally go loud about a lot of what we've been cooking over here. We got a lot of new members to announce very soon, so a huge new cohort of the leading RWA brands that have come together, united to launch many different initiatives, from our great event, Wally Fest, that we're planning at the end of the year, to, of course, the Wally DAO, and our decentralized initiative to bring together crypto natives and form a community around RWAs, as well as many other initiatives, including the way we plan to launch Wally, which is the RWA pod. So you're hearing it for the first time here, sneak reveal. Just going to tease you here that we are going to let you stake in order to support RWAs and earn Wally at the same time. You might even get some bonus rewards on top. So details are going to be released, but the way Wally is going to release for the first time ever for you is through a new staking pod that we're calling the RWA pod. Details to be revealed. So make sure you're following us on Twitter, on X, RWA Foundation _, and tap into our Telegram channel as well. We got just a great community. We're hanging out, doing fun spaces on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern every week. And with that, I will get back to the show, but just get ready for a crazy number of announcements in the next couple of weeks. So it's not going to be a slow RWA summer here to end. With that, let's go pick some companies of the week.
All right, Herwig, what's going on?
Time of the show, Kyle. It's that time of the show.
It is the best time of the show. In fact, I'm looking for my trophy. I think it's around here somewhere, but it's time for, maybe it's over there. The Companies of the Week Award. This is where you and I pick two companies that we wanted to give a special shout out for doing something interesting, novel, or driving the industry forward in a meaningful way. This is my favorite part of the show. And I honestly think my favorite part of the show is actually hearing your Company of the Week winner, Herwig, because I just think you're so incredibly talented, have great taste in companies. And so I can't wait. Don't make me wait any longer. Who is your choice for this week, episode 294?
Well, I made you wait a little bit longer. All right, my company of the week, bad joke aside, is none other than tZERO, Kyle. I have to give my company of the week to tZERO. I know. Everyone's like, God, yet another RWA chain. What do we need this for? Don't sleep on the infrastructure tZERO has. They actually are backed by ICE, as I mentioned earlier, as well as already have a foray of assets on their infrastructure as well as in their pipeline. I believe they said they're planning to launch $1 billion worth of tokens on this new chain. So immediately they'll be one of the biggest, sort of from a TVL, as people like to say, as I like to say, assets on chain perspective. As you know, I'm a huge believer in native utility tokens, whether they be governance or power to the app or the utility, or whether it's some sort of buyback model tied to revenue. In this case, there's the tZERO security token, which now probably my suspicion will be that they will send a lot of these utility tokens to a lot of their participants, right? If I was them, I would absolutely reward all of anybody who used the tZERO platform with this utility token, just like we've seen with Uniswap and the rumored OpenSea token as examples, right? So I think this is a great way to take advantage of, this community building exercise, while at the same time building a real infrastructure that, if they're one of the front lines, if they're one of the marketplaces, the rails that's settling a lot of these transactions, I get why they would want to be the blockchain of choice for those, and then ultimately allow the world to bridge into that with cross-chain interoperability or other partnerships to let people tie into that ecosystem. So I think this is one of the very first positive steps tZERO has taken in the direction of crypto, as opposed to in the direction of sort of security tokens, which you need to adapt. It's time to adapt. It's time to get with the RWA program, and that means having your own token, and that means having your own chain, apparently. So good on you, tZERO. I'm excited to see what's to come. Happy to give you some advice. You guys are great members of the RWA Foundation, so we're happy to see you all subscribe to these principles. That's why you're my company of the week.
Hey, it's an exciting choice, a new technical development from a institutional backed blockchain, now actual blockchain company, a real business blockchain. Love this choice. They're a Company of the Year winner. They've been in the industry, been in this game for a long time, still surviving, still thriving, still doing stuff, keeping their head above water. I think that's incredibly commendable and a really solid choice this week, Herwig.
There's stuff a brewing, but there's stuff a brewing everywhere, Kyle. That's why you also get to choose every week, and I get to say it's my favorite thing to hear your pick. So go for it. I'm waiting with bated breath.
Well, Herwig, I picked another big business. This one is actually considerably larger than tZERO. My winner this week is Coinbase. Coinbase has, the partnership with JPMorgan, streamlining that on-ramping, off-ramping to build more liquidity, a really successful stock on the stock market. And now announcing on-chain equities are coming. Dude, this is exactly what we were hoping for. On-chain equities, I think, would be tremendous and huge. Obviously, through Coinbase is the best place to do it. And very quickly, Coinbase and Robinhood become real competitors here, with Robinhood doing the stocks, Coinbase doing the crypto, and both battling for everything in the middle. I think there's a really interesting bet here on which company do you think in 5 years from now is going to have a higher market cap or something along those lines. I think there's probably a fun bet to be made there, because these are two of the heavyweights in the industry, and I just love to see Coinbase getting involved in tokenized stocks.
Big vision behind Brian Armstrong and the Coinbase team. Absolutely love it. We definitely have multiple episodes out of our almost 300 in the past on the earlier side, I'll say, that have been predicting this rise of Coinbase's tokenization chapter and direction.
Google search, Herwig, is that Coinbase and Robinhood have basically the same market cap right now, 82 to 83 million for both of these firms. So, if anybody listening wants to make a friendly bet with somebody in their network, now is a really good time to look forward 5 years and say, which one do you think is going to have a higher market cap? They're about even right now. Where do you see Robinhood or Coinbase going? I think Coinbase has a really interesting shout here. And so it's, but obviously Robinhood, backed by big old Kenji and the Citadel guys, has certainly a lot of firepower as well.
Well, I mean, you'll probably be able to make that bet maybe on Coinbase's prediction market.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a good debate there, Kyle. But that's all we have for you fine people. We hope you have an incredible weekend. We, of course, hope to see you again next week on Friday. Of course, we have our X Spaces as well throughout the week. Mondays at 11, Mondays on chain. We have Thursdays, the RWA watering hole at 10 a.m. Eastern, and a variety of different spaces we like to jump on as well. I know you're active on Wolf and your own spaces, Kyle. So with that, any latest updates from Global Sonlin?
The big one for us is that we are continuing to build the infrastructure. We're hopefully have some new announcements with a few blockchain protocols on building new integrations, and I think a press release coming down the pipeline on some new tokenized assets. So all good things coming your way.
Love to hear it. Well, everybody, with that, of course, have a great weekend. The RWA pod has been revealed. So again, if you don't know about Wally, if you don't know about the RWA Foundation, come tap in. And with that, happy tokenizing.